It's good to see so many invitations and welcomings happening. Welcome again. Now, if you're new with us, each January, and this January is no different, we have a time where we wrestle, we talk, we hear, we listen to challenging conversations. And this year, our theme is, and our topic is One Church, Embodying the Good News. So each Sunday this month, we have been hearing about experiences of church through the eyes of a variety of people. Their perspectives help us to wrestle with the idea, what is one church? And as we sit together, as we listen to these stories, as we listen to their voices, as we see their view of church, witnessing the ways they understand the good news of the gospel, we expand our imagination of how to embody the good news together, of how to journey together to be the good news. So hopefully we expand our practices of living as a community of faith, and we continue to build resiliency together. Not that we somehow learn to toe the line, I said this last week, not that we figure out how to be correct, but that we learn to embody the good news, forgiving one another when we get it wrong, loving one another, being gracious with one another, and trying again. Living in the tensions of joy and sorrow. Some of us have experienced deep pain in church communities, while others have felt that church has just been great. It's been uplifting. It's had fed our lives. We want to invite some of these stories on stage and to discuss and to hear the stories that we don't always have the privilege of hearing. And so that's what this month has been about, hearing the different voices. We invite to listen, to have ears and hearts, that together we can build our appreciation for the differences amongst us, and that we allow to hold space for one another. Now, followers of Jesus, I've said this before, we believe that we are made in the image of God, so that when we come in contact with any person, we encounter the image of God. But greater than that, all of us together make up the image of God. So if someone feels excluded on purpose or by accident, if someone feels left out, the image of God lacks. So this is what our series has been about, being one church, one body, the image of Christ. Learning to see church through the eyes of other people, to help us understand and broaden our perspective, to even identify blind spots that we may have as we learn to follow Jesus every day. So not only are we going to do that through this month, I've said this earlier in the beginning, but I just want to say it again. At the end of this series on January 29th, we're going to have a workshop with a lunch, and we'd love for all of you to be involved. It's going to be a place where we're going to be challenged, be active, talk about the things we've been learning, ask questions. There's going to be dynamic conversations happening. So please, if you're interested, register. I'd encourage you to register, and it helps us to know how much lunch to have ready for you. So it's important to learn together, so please sign up, and you can do that online or go to the information desk after the service. So today we continue our conversation, and today's conversation will be more interview style, and I have the honor of introducing to you my friend Wyndham Thiessen and Alicia Thompson. Wyndham and Alicia are L'Arche Saskatoon community members. Wyndham is the community leader at L'Arche Saskatoon, and I'm just going to invite them to come on up as they make their way forward here. Now, Wyndham and I go a little bit back. Our boys, our sons, are best buds. They hang out together all the time. Wyndham is a musician. He plays locally a lot, actually, around here. So you might have seen him on stage performing somewhere. And he said he misses playing worship music. So I said, hey, David, we'll chat with you. But I don't know if that'll work or not, because he is also a member of St. Stephen Church. As is Alicia, who was born in Flin Flon, but for the last 5 years has been here in Saskatoon at the L'Arche community. Welcome here, friends. Let's give them a hand. Now, let me just pray for our time together, and then we'll kick things off. I'm going to give you this clicker as well. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for being here in our midst. God, as we listen to Wyndham and Alicia, as we hear their stories, as they share their experience of L'Arche and the church, God, give us eyes to see and ears to hear. Prep our hearts and minds to understand what it looks like to be one church with all its diversity. We thank you for being in our presence. We pray this all in your name. Amen. Amen. Well, welcome here again, friends. Why don't we just take a moment to have you officially introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Thompson, and I am a core member of Larsh Saskatoon.
And my name is Wyndham Thiessen, and as Paul said, I've been involved with Larsh Saskatoon for the past 16 years, and before that, Larsh in Vancouver and Lethbridge. And that's a little bit about who we are. Okay. I don't know what else. What's my favorite color? Green. What's yours?
Blue.
There you go. We're going deep today.
Mine is blue as well, so I'm with you, Alicia. Wonderful. Well, would you tell us a little bit about what is Larsh community, both locally and globally?
Okay, so where do I point here? Oh, the big button. That big button. There we go. Okay. So, maybe I'll talk a bit about Larsh, just our history and the big picture, and Alicia, you can talk about Larsh and Saskatoon a bit. So if I said, who here has heard of Larsh before? Maybe stick up your hand. Okay, so some of us have heard about Larsh. So, what we're about in Larsh is people with and without intellectual disabilities sharing life together, building community together. We're really it's really about relationships, maybe when it comes down to it. And Larsh started in the 60s, and it was a response to institutions. At the time, the prevailing thought was that the best way to care for people who have intellectual disabilities would be to have them living in institutions. But the reality was pretty dark. As you know, like institutions are somewhere cross between sort of a hospital and a jail. So Jean Vanier, our founder, when he kind of became aware of this reality, the way he told his story is that he felt Jesus wanted him to do something. So he invited two men from a large institution with 1,000+ people living there to come live with him, and they started sharing life together in a little house in France. And this vision of people with different abilities sharing life together took off. And today there's 160 Larsh communities in 38 countries. There's 30 Larsh communities in Canada. I should say, so Jean Vanier, our founder, he died 4 years ago. 3 years ago, we learned that he abused women. He was the spiritual director for many people, and so that was a really painful thing we've discovered, and we're still kind of figuring out how to tell our story now, but it feels a little... Anyway, we're all about honesty, and that's just part of our story now. So that's part of our story, but Larsh remains what it always has been, a beautiful place where people with different abilities share life together. And Paul gave me your little book about what you guys are about, and you're all about being part of God, renewing the world, renewing all things, and that Larsh continues to be that, where we've got our part to play in the renewal of all things. So Alicia, I'll pass it to you, and maybe you can talk about what's Larsh about here. What does it look like here in Saskatoon?
Okay, well, we have a gathering about once a month, and we have pizza and play games and just learn about different, just what God is about and what Larsh is about. And like I say, we have a pizza, and then we just play games, and so that happens about...
Sometimes we do the limbo.
Yeah, sometimes we do the limbo. It's a pretty good time.
And then Christopher, I just want to talk about
So
that.
we have two soon to be 3 houses, and I live in the one, Christopher House. I've been there about a year. My year anniversary just passed in December 3rd. And I have, it's been my dream to live in a large house as I say, a group home for about 5 years, and it finally came through in December 2021. And we also have a workshop which is held at Circle Drive Alliance Church, and I go there 5 days a week from 10 to 3, and it's another place to be with people, because I so love to be with people.
Should we read our identity statement?
Yes.
I'll just say one little word. So all L'Arche communities around the world, we have an identity statement that says who we are, and I thought Alicia and I could just read this here. So you want to do the first one?
So we are people with and without intellectual disabilities. Share life in communities belonging to an international federation.
And mutual relationships and trust in God are at the heart of our journey together. There's some pictures there of our prayer night.
And our last statement is we celebrate the unique value of each person and recognize our needs of one another.
And I might add that's one of the 2 L'Arche communities in the Ukraine. And then just one piece from our mission statement. It says our mission is together to engage in our diverse cultures working together to create a human society. So in the same way, and maybe we'll talk a little bit later about, church as body, like we're together with our different abilities and gifts, we're working together towards the renewal of all things. So, pause there.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's certainly, from my experience and my vantage point, I've seen L'Arche communities a beautiful mosaic of inclusiveness and hope and working together. Thank you for sharing a little bit about what you guys are, what it is, and globally and locally, and what you guys do there. But my question next is, how did you guys get involved with L'Arche?
Well, I moved here about 5-ish years ago, and then one day I got a call that said, we have an opening, would you like to do a trial on air? So I took it, and let alone, I've been there ever since. So
Sounds like my story. My now wife, then girlfriend, she was involved with L'Arche in Vancouver, and she said, "Oh, come to one of our coffee houses." So I went there and experienced just a real welcome and feeling just, I feel pretty at ease here, and people coming up and introducing themselves, and so just that feeling of being able to be oneself. I mean, I think any healthy community, that's what you want, and I was drawn to that, and certainly that's been my experience in different L'Arche communities I've been a part of. So, yeah.
So I think when we were talking about it the other day, you also mentioned just that non-anxious presence that I don't want to speak for you, but I don't know if you want to touch on that now or later, but do you want to speak on that?
Sure. I mean, I just, in different settings, we always, I don't know, you don't always feel totally at ease, right? You could talk about putting on masks in different settings or whatever, but in L'Arche, people just are who they are often, and there's, I just feel an invitation that can be true for all of us, and in Lethbridge, there was a woman, Jane, who, I don't know, if I were sitting on a love seat like this and this seat were empty, she would just plunk herself down, and Jane didn't communicate using words, but she'd take your hand and just kind of move it back and forth, and you could sit there for 10 minutes. And I just, and her presence just was very welcoming, and just, it's a place where I don't have to feel anxious about really what other people think about me, that sort of thing. So, Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Wayne. I'm sorry to put you on the spot a little bit off the notes here.
That was so embarrassing, Paul.
I just felt when you shared that with me last week or the week before, it struck a chord of just even the wording where you can be just yourself. So many of us go with different masks and different personalities in different situations. So I got to look this way or feel that way. And in this conversation of one church, I sometimes wonder if there's masks that we wear when we gather together. And to have that awareness of a space where you can be not anxious and just be yourself in the presence of God and the presence of community. So that's kind of when I wanted to tease that out a little bit, because I just felt that that's a beautiful model of a space where you can just be not anxious and be yourself. So thanks for that. So the next question I actually have for you, Alicia. You mentioned the workshop, the day program at L'Arche and at Christopher House. Can you tell us what you like about the workshop? What's your favorite things?
Well, as most should know, as I share, I'm a people person. I do enjoy being around people, but I do, like everybody else, I do need my downtime. And it's just a place where I can do activities or projects with people, but then I can do it on my own time. So.
Oh, that's great. How many people do you share the space with?
About 8 people.
Oh man, you would need downtime too then. That makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. Now, you shared in your identity statement, Alicia and Wyndham, that is an important part of L'Arche identity is the mutual relationships and trust in God, and that they are at the heart of the journey together. Now, we at Lakeview Community are in the midst of a series, as I keep saying, one church embodying the good news. We are learning from all the voices and wrestling together what it looks like for us to follow God. And we too are expanding our practices as community of faith learning and expanding our imagination to celebrate unique value of every person and hopefully recognize our need for one another. And because of that, I think it's so helpful for us to learn from you. So what has your experience at L'Arche taught you that would help us as a church on this journey of learning to recognize one another, to see one another, to be who we are, and maybe like demolish those blind spots that we may have?
So when Alicia and I were talking about today and getting ready, we were talking about foot washing a bit, because foot washing is something we do in L'Arche. Many L'Arche communities will do this often in the week leading up to Easter. You want to talk a bit about foot washing, Alicia?
Well, I, for one, am not, I really don't like anybody touching my feet. I can't even touch my own feet. So it's good, but it's also a little bit weird too. I have to trust someone else to touch my feet.
No, thanks, Alicia. And someone washes your feet, you wash someone else's feet. And, and it comes from, this is something Jesus did, right? At the Last Supper, and John tells the story. Jesus washes his disciples' feet and says, did something that a servant would have done, and said this is something we're supposed to do for each other. In the way that I'm loving you, you need to love one another. And so we do this in L'Arche, but when, that story is in John 13, but I always feel like I want to include John 12, because if you back it up a little bit, there's this story where Mary, not Mary, she's mother, Mary, one of Jesus' friends, anoints Jesus' feet with perfume and dries his feet with her hair. And it's, people are like, what's going on? This is really weird. And Judas is upset that the perfume is so expensive. And but what I see going on there is that Mary has something to offer. She wants to offer Jesus. And Jesus is showing us how to receive, no, she's got something beautiful she's doing here. Leave her alone. thank you, Mary. And we see this too in John 13, where Jesus washes Peter's feet, and Peter's like, you can't do this. And Jesus says, yeah, I have to, Peter, you gotta let me do this. And then Peter's always saying good things. He's like, well, then wash all of me. But the point there for L'Arche and for church is that, Jesus is saying we have to serve. Jesus, that's super important. But it's equally important to be open to what people have to give to us too. When we talk about mutual relationships in L'Arche, that's what it's about. We're not just here to do things for people, as important as that is. People have gifts. Everyone has gifts that we need to be open to receiving too. And so that's an important thing in L'Arche, and I think it's important in church too, because sometimes we can get fixed on that. I'm going to help people, there's a charity there, and don't want to knock it, but there's a certain kind of charity mindset that is, you can help someone and still be at a distance from them, right? And so it's like, well, I don't just have something to give, but I need to recognize that everyone has something to offer me as well that's going to make my life richer, going to make our church life richer. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The whole idea of everyone has something to offer and everyone has a gift.
And maybe, talk a bit more about gifts. I mean, so Alicia, want to talk about what we do on people's birthdays?
We say appreciations about what we like about the person, whether it's an anniversary, a birthday, or basically, so we just say what we like about them and what their gifts are and what we appreciate about them, and yeah.
So I see on our slide there, so there's Sarah and Josh and Emma. So they were cooking at our church, baking, I guess. What were you guys baking?
I think we were making bannock, but I'm not really 100% sure.
So if it was Sarah, Sarah doesn't communicate using words, but she's very expressive and communicates a lot. And so if it were Sarah's birthday, what might you say, what are Sarah's gifts?
She has this amazing smile that if I'm having a bad day or whatever, she smiles at me and she makes me forget all of my worries and what I was having a bad day about. So that's one of her gifts, and she's a good listener, so.
And I'm going to embarrass you here. I'm going to say, well, maybe I won't. But anyway, one of your gifts, Alicia, you're a super encourager. I would say you're really, you said you're a people person, but you really build people up. During the pandemic, when we were not seeing each other regularly, Alicia wrote cards to lots of the people you knew, right? And so, we're part of the same church. Alicia, I know you wrote cards to pretty much most of the people in our congregation, including me. So that was just, I see that as being part of your gift of encouragement. It's super awesome. Anyway, it could go on. Everyone has gifts. Sometimes maybe people's gifts aren't as on the surface. Some people's gifts are more obvious. Paul, you're a leader, a speaker. Some people, maybe it takes some time to get to know them. But we all have gifts. I could go on. One gift I appreciate, one member of our community, one of our core members, and our prayer nights, her prayers are you know who I'm talking about. They're just really honest. She prays her life. And so it might be, God, today my brother punched me and I told him to F off. Lord, hear our prayer. And it's but it's so psalmy, right? It's David prays his whole life and she prays her life. And I see the gift in that, and I feel that's an invitation for me to, that's how we should be praying, so.
That's a hard transition here. I love that prayer, though. Lord, hear our prayers. I'll talk to my boys about that, too, when they have disagreements, to maybe end them with Lord, hear our prayers. What a great example. I love how you point out that everyone has a gift and L'Arche community. And I wonder if we shifted our vision, our lens a little bit as a church to see our community together when we gather here is a place for us to find our gifts, recognize our gifts, be encouraged in our gifts, and to use our gifts. Not a place just to see somebody gifted, if I can use that, but a place where we learn our gifts and share gifts together. I think that's a beautiful vision that you are giving us. Thank you for that. It gives us that idea of this one body that we're talking about, this one church. And Apostle Paul talks a lot about the one body. I know you touched on that a little bit when we talked. Did you want to talk on the one body a little bit?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, that's such a beautiful, just true image. That's what the church is, right? We're a body with many parts. And do you want to say a bit, Alicia, about what that passage means to you, where Paul talks about the church as a body? And
What that means to me is we all have, like the body of Christ, we all have different, we all have different gifts that we can bring. Like someone can be the foot, and that might be, it might bring have its own use, and someone might be the hands, and it might have its own use. So I believe we're basically all like the body of Christ.
That's great. Thank you, Alicia. Now, so you shared a little bit about L'Arche and your identity and your mission and what L'Arche community is like. Let me ask you both, tell me a little bit about your church experience and maybe a little bit about your faith experience if you're open to sharing.
do you want to talk about church a little bit? Why you like going to St. Stephen's?
I like going to church because it draws me closer to God, and I have made a fair amount of friends there.
Can I ask you a question? So at our church, we have two services, at 10:30 and 8:30. And Alicia, you go to the 8:30, and maybe just ask, like, why do you choose to go to the 8:30 one?
I choose to go to the 8:30 one because it's not as many people, and it's easier to get around with my walker.
And maybe, so when we were talking about different things about we were sharing quite a bit about, faith life and prayer and stuff, but maybe one thing we were talking about, I just, like, I asked you, what's one of your favorite Bible passages?
My favorite Bible passage is Psalm 139, which is, "You are fearfully and wonderfully made in your mother's womb." I knitted you together, and it just means that, God knew us when we were, even before He knew us, He thought of us, and He had a plan for each and every one of us.
I'll answer my question. Wyndham, what's one of your favorite Bible passages? Well, I don't know, but I'll tell you one of the last ones that stuck with me. So I won't go into the background, but anyway, I'm kind of trying to read the Bible alphabetically because there are other ways of doing it. I was kind of getting stuck, and it's taken a couple of years, but I'm in the M's right now. So I read Malachi, and then I started Mark is next, and right at the beginning, Mark's like, got this gospel, good news, Jesus Christ, as it said in the prophet Isaiah. And then he starts quoting. And I'm like, hold on a second. Here it says, prepare the way. I'm like, I just was reading that's in Malachi. That's not Isaiah, right? And then he goes on and quotes from Isaiah too. But, and it, so you could say, oh, did Mark make a mistake? And there's, when you read about, how people wrote at that time, you can contextualize it and whatnot. But my takeaway was like, he's got this amazing story. Like, away we go. Good news of Jesus Christ. We got to tell this story. And like, he's not too hung up on the details. Like, he's like, I just got to get this story out. Isaiah and Malachi, doesn't matter, away we go. And the reason I'm kind of sharing that, and maybe this we'll kind of end up talking about, like, is there more stuff for the church? But I think it's something I need to hear. Like, sometimes we can get worried about, oh, are we going to do it right? Are we going to make a mistake and stuff? And even in our relationships with people. But I think if we're talking about being inclusive, there's something good. We want to be the body, have everyone share their gifts, and we're not always going to, I don't know, get it totally right all the time. We'll step on each other's toes, but I think, if we can hopefully extend forgiveness where that's needed, and the big point is sharing the good news of Jesus, or it's being welcoming and celebrating one another, and don't let. My wife Amy shared a quote last week by a woman named Mary Jo Letty. Oh my gosh, it's like a metaphor for my life. And Mary Jo Letty said, "Start before you're ready," and that really stuck with me, because if you're, I can get really hung up. Thanks, Paul. On little details, and that, there's a little bit of fear that can trip you up. But I love that. Start before you're ready. Let's go. Focus on God. Focus on what's important. So.
That's wonderful. Thanks, friends. So what do you think, so your L'Arche experience, your L'Arche reality, what does it have to teach us, the church, on the practical level?
Okay, I'm going to change the new slide here. So, Alicia, that's you at the map thing. So Alicia and we were part of this L'Arche Canada National Committee that came up with our plan for the next 4 years. What are we going to work on together? And I don't know, you want to describe how that experience was for you being part of that committee?
Well, I eventually liked being a part of that committee, but at first it was like, why God? Why did you choose me? So it was a lot of long meetings. I did enjoy it, but some of the words and stuff they said were right over my head. So, yeah, but other than that, I was actually kind of surprised at how well I did, because I did bring some good points. I was surprised how well I did, because I never even thought I could do that.
No, absolutely. Like, it was awesome being part of that committee together, and I think we both shared a lot that was important. I think, like, a lot of it was on Zoom. There was a lot of talking in words, and sometimes my eyes were just glazing over. And I bring that up partly because, well, what I was talking about before, like, I don't think, like in L'Arche, of course, in any setting, we want to be inclusive and accessible and make sure that everyone can be taken part. But I don't think we got it right. I think we could do better. And I think, so I don't know, but I think there's a lesson there that, like, again, it's like, well, let's do this. And, oh, okay, we didn't get it right. Maybe we'll try and do better next time, right? I don't know, that was one lesson I took away there. Other lessons, your question is just about kind of what, other lessons for the church, sort of, I don't know, sometimes it's helpful to generalize, if we're talking about people with disabilities, or I was thinking in Acts, they're like, there's a problem here, the widows aren't getting fed, we're generalizing about a group, but, usually the best questions to ask, or sometimes a better question to ask, are just about people, like, what does Wyndham need? What does Alicia need? Paul, what do you need to be like a fully contributing member of our body here? So just focus on the particular people in front of you, because everyone's different. Everyone has different needs, different gifts. So that would be one, maybe.
Well, I love that. Be careful about generalizing. Notice the people that are in front of you, know them, and get to know what they need. It's simple, but it's a work in progress. And
And maybe just a couple examples, like we have our weekly prayer night, and we take turns doing readings or prayers, and one person who's a part of our prayer nights, like she'll read, but she'll also get quite anxious if she doesn't know where she fits in or where other people fit in. So our last prayer night, we got a whiteboard. Someone suggested this, great idea. We'll put first reading, this person, second reading, this is where you fit. prayer. And that was just kind of what she needed, not to be anxious, right? Another example, that same prayer night, we've got a worship band, but we've got a little band that plays, and one fellow, Christopher, joins us, and he loves playing music. He plays guitar, he plays ukulele, he plays harmonica. And when he first joined us, he just had a C harmonica, so that's great if we're in the key of C. But there's not all the songs are in the key of C, right? But we kind of were like, okay, how do we make this work? And so Chris went out, and we got a harmonica in each key. So what it requires, like sometimes doing this well takes a bit of time and preparation, right? But like, okay, here's our list of songs, and here's the keys, and so Christopher can see, okay, next song's an F. Goes to his thing, pulls out the F harmonica, and I've had people come after him like, wow, Chris sounded amazing, and he does. But it's because we've just taken that time and preparation to respond to his particular needs, I would say so.
Thank you, Wyndham. It certainly is a beautiful picture of a work in progress, but also recognizing each other's gifts, developing gifts, noticing one another, and speaking into the things we notice, or being allowed to serve one another or be served. Thank you for that. Just one last thing. I did want to ask one more question, and that's really, what's a question I didn't ask, but you wish I asked, and how would you answer it?
I was thinking long and hard about this, and I could not come up with an answer.
It's a good answer.
How about, after all this is done, where would you like me to take you guys for lunch? No.
Oh, good one. That's, yeah. Give them, yep.
No, I do this. So
The cafe.
If you'd said, anything else, here's just something that someone once shared, and it really stuck with me. But so talked a little bit about Mary. She anointed Jesus' feet, and she has her sister Martha and a brother Lazarus, who Jesus loved. And there's nothing definitive in the Bible, but there's reason to think he may have been a man with a disability. If you think about it, like Mary and Martha are the ones who are talking. Martha is kind of the one in charge of the household. A little unusual. We don't hear Lazarus talking at all. But when Lazarus is ill, eventually he died. Mary sends a message to Jesus. The one whom you love is ill. So it's suggestive, and it's just if you're ever reading John and you get there, it's just something to bear in mind. Maybe Lazarus was a man with a disability, because it's a bit of a different situation there. Anyway, I'll just leave you with that thought.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you, friends, so much for sharing about your community, about who you are, and how we can learn from the L'Arche community to be inclusive, to see each other's gifts, to know that everyone has something to offer us, and to be willing to be served. Thank you for that. Let's give them a hand.